For Thursday and the following Tuesday, these are the profits we're going to do. If I can read my handwriting. So for Thursday, and I don't have the exam for the wisdom literature to give to you, I will either send that out later on today or sometime tomorrow. You'll have at least a week to do it. So for Thursday, Jonah, very short, and Habakkuk, not much longer. And then for Tuesday of next week, so Thursday is the 24th. Tuesday is a week from today, which makes it the 29th. Okay. Zechariah and Malachi. I've chosen to do Zechariah because I'm hoping we get to Revelation. Because you'll see, hopefully, if we do Revelation, there's a lot of similar imagery between Zechariah, hold on, Michaela, between Zechariah and Revelation. So before we get to this, let's talk about papers a bit. I'm trying to find, I had a note. There it is. So hopefully this won't take the entire period, but it might. Okay. I'm doing this actually for all my classes. I don't remember. About what the average was in here. Looks like the average was right around a C, which was better than my Monday night class. The average there is around a C minus. Better, much better. Wow. Much, much better than my Shakespeare course, which is an upper division English course. The average there is probably about a D. Over half the class got D's or F's. Okay, 2 of the F's because they were turned in weekly. Right? So you guys are not bad. Let me just say that. I don't think there was anything lower. Nothing lower than a C minus. So that's, for my courses, that's really well. Usually, my sophomore lit courses, the first paper is average about a D. Okay, so you guys aren't bad. But I still want to go over some of this because I think some of you can use a refresher, let's say, for writing essays. One of you, and I won't single this person out, But I almost wanted to just read that person's paper because it's a perfect example of an A paper. Okay? So, start at the beginning. Title. What's your title do? What's the purpose of your title?
Prepares the reader for the subject.
Prepares the reader for the subject. So, topics. Let me find one. Let's see. First one. In the books of the Old Testament, we have read Genesis, Exodus, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel. Walking with before God is an image we often see that may be literal or metaphorical. Referring to and quoting from Genesis, Exodus, and one other book, discuss the metaphor of walking with God. What it means, what it entails, what results from it. Would this be a good title? Nobody did this. Okay? This is an example drawn kind of from a different course, but it's similar. Walking. No, that's not a good example. Are you talking about the physical process of walking, what it takes, the physiology? It's extremely unclear. Walking with God. That's better. It's still a little ambiguous. What should it be? Walking with God. What should come next? In the Old Testament. Or in the first 7 or 8 books of the Bible, or something like that. It should be more narrow. That is, that title serves kind of as a really, really brief roadmap to what the reader is going to find in the essay. Okay? A couple of you, I'm thinking, I might be confusing this with a different class, but a couple of you had titles that were a little bit ambiguous, so I put ambiguous, or A and B if you look at these, or vague, be more specific, etc. Okay? Introduction. First of all, and I don't include this in the overarching thing, an essay is not a paragraph. I did have one person, I don't think it was this class, I think it was another one. I did have one person who turned in a paragraph. Now, it was a 2.5-page paragraph, but it was a single paragraph. That's not an essay. Okay? An essay has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It could literally have 3 paragraphs. Beginning, introduction, middle, body, end, conclusion. Usually for an essay of this length, you want more paragraphs than that. I'm not one of those people who suggest every essay ought to have a 5-paragraph structure. If you need 7, take 7. It all depends on how many ideas you are embedding within your thesis for proving your point. Okay? But the introduction serves as what purpose? Take the title and expand it. Then the introduction serves as what's called a précis, P-R-E-C-I-S, with a weird pronunciation of the E there, a précis, or kind of a summary of everything that's going to be in the paper. Obviously, because it's a summary, you can't include everything. That is, you can't include all of your reasons or all of your ideas, but you want to give kind of the overall idea. And you want to conclude it, usually, not all the time, some professors will say, have your thesis at the beginning, okay? Most will say, put it at the end. Concludes with your thesis. What is a thesis? What's another word for thesis? Give me a synonym. Louder? Topic sentence. Okay. Close.
Your stance.
What do you mean? Your stance is what he said.
Your argument.
Bingo. It's an argument. How many of you have been in an argument, let's say, in the last week? None of you have been in an argument with anybody? Really? What are you, angels? come to my world. What do you do when you get in an argument?
Try to persuade the other party.
Try to persuade the other party. How? Of what? What are you trying to persuade them of? That they're wrong and you're right. Okay? So when you're trying to persuade somebody else that you are right, how do you do that? Is it all nice and calm and lovey-dovey? Is it all wonderful, soft, easy, smooth words that if you were to read calmly, it would just lull them to sleep? No. That's why I said, how many of you have been in an argument last week? Usually what happens when you get in an argument with somebody? Yeah. Your voice gets louder. Why? Because you're opinionated. That's what your thesis should be. Your thesis should verbally reach out from the paper, grab me by the throat, and slap me around a little bit. Right? You're taking a position. Not in this little namby-pamby, wishy-washy, well, on the one hand, but on the other hand, but from this perspective, but take a stance. Okay? That's your ground. You're not going to give an inch. Okay? That's what your thesis should do. That's why I wrote on several of your papers, it needs to be clear and it needs to be strong. It needs to be forceful. Okay? So, walking with God. Walking with God may mean, no. Walking with God in the Old Testament means, and then you assert what it means. Notice, in the Old Testament, not in one's personal, quote-unquote, spiritual life. Why? Because the topic isn't talking about you. It's talking about in the Old Testament. Okay? What else? So it should be clear, it should be forceful, it's an argument. I shouldn't be able to read your thesis and go, I don't know what this means. Or, where's your thesis? As I did in a few. Probably not as many of your papers as in some of my other classes. Okay? So then what do you do after that introductory paragraph? Because I haven't included it here. I might have written this. You need a transition, right? What a lot of people do with their thesis, with their argument, is they craft it in such a way that it has several points to it. Okay? And then each of those points becomes a paragraph. So that you're going to use a single point for each paragraph. That's why each paragraph has a topic sentence. The body here means the body of the paper. This applies to multiple paragraphs, right? Has a topic sentence. What's the point of the topic sentence? It's kind of like Michaela said, a mini thesis. It's the point. It's the argument of that paragraph. Everything in that paragraph should refer back to and support the topic sentence. As soon as you introduce an idea that is separate from that topic sentence, you probably have written, and this I don't have on that sheet, you probably have written next to that new one of these, new paragraph. Because I don't know what the symbol is on the computer to type in a paragraph symbol. Okay? So if you have that, that means you now have a new idea in that paragraph. So you need to create a new paragraph, which means you also need a new topic sentence for it. All right? What else? So topic sentences, everything goes back to and supports that. So quotations, because you were required to have quotations, whichever response you did, five quotations. All of them required 5 quotations. You know, some of them specific books, others not specific books. Why do you use quotations? Prove your point. How does a quotation prove your point? Bingo. And thank you for using that word, Sierra. It's your evidence. Your paper is like you're a prosecutor. You are arguing your case before the judge. It's me. And when you use quotations, that's Your Honor, and it'd be perfectly fine to call me Your Honor in class if you want. Your Honor, here is Exhibit A. Here's Exhibit B. Here's Exhibit C. Here's Exhibit D. Here's Exhibit E. Okay? If you've ever watched a Law and Order type show, or a show dealing with the law, or a film, etc., what does every prosecutor or every defense attorney do once he or she enters evidence? Do they just say, Your Honor, I'd like to enter this as Exhibit A, and then go and talk about something else? What do they always do? They explain what the value of that evidence is. So, you include your quotation, and I'm going to come down to the end for a moment, and then you comment on it. What's the purpose of commenting on that quotation? Now, here, I want you to think slyly, think cunningly, think deceitfully. You want to force me to accept your interpretation of that quotation. That is, I might read that quotation and go, that doesn't work. Well, and then you kind of go, these are the droids you're looking for. This is the quotation that you want. This is what it means. And I go, oh, that's what it means. You're trying to force me to see that quotation within your perspective and how it supports your topic sentence, which goes back to, ultimately, your thesis. Okay? So every time you quote from a source, comment on that quote. Go back to the beginning. So you have a quotation. What do you have to do? You have to introduce that quotation. Now, that can be as simple as Genesis says, and then you quote Genesis. Or, as stated in 2 Samuel, comma, and then you quote 2 Samuel. Okay? But you never want to have, here's your paper, your sentence, you're writing on along, you have a period, end your sentence, you end your idea, quotation, and then you go on and blah, blah, blah. You never want to have a quotation just kind of sitting there between your sentences. Why? Because then it's just kind of floating. It's not anchored to anything. You want to anchor that quotation to some kind of introductory clause or tag or sentence. And you'll have that introductory comment, whatever, and you're going to conclude that with either a colon or a comma. Which of those you use is determined by the kind of grammar that you've used in the introductory comment. Okay? If it's incomplete, okay, then you need the comma. If it's a complete introduction, then you would use the colon. Citations. I don't think there were many. I don't think there were any citation problems here. But when you cite a book of the Bible, you cite it by the title of the book, chapter and verse. You don't have to type out chapter 12. You just do something like that. Okay? The book isn't italicized because it's a work of sacred literature, nor is it underlined or pretty font or pretty colors or anything like that. Okay, so you get down, you finish your paragraphs that are supporting your thesis, and you get to the conclusion. What does that conclusion do? It's pretty...
I can't get the answer to that on Apple Watch.
What the hell? Shut up. Big Brother's always watching me. The world is a scary place. It concludes, right? It wraps it up. How does it wrap it up? And this is my conclusion. No. You could begin to conclude. It's kind of clunky, right? The conclusion kind of goes back to the introduction. It reframes and restates everything that was said in the introduction. You don't merely copy and paste. I've had students do that before. Okay? Don't do that. Okay? It summarizes your major points. You don't have to cite them. You don't have to go into detail, but it summarizes them. Okay? As was shown, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Then you have your works cited page, and I don't think we had really any, other some little formatting stuff. Some of you did not use, wherever it is, this edition of the Bible, and that's fine. Some of you used online versions, which can make it a little bit different. If you have questions about comments I put on yours, ask. Okay. Is there anything else we need to talk about in terms of those papers? If you have questions, ask. I've got a class right after this, so you can't ask me right after class. Come during office hours. What day is today? Today's Tuesday. So Thursday morning before class or Thursday evening before my 6 o'clock class, or shoot me an email. Okay? I'll give you a much longer email than you probably want to hear, depending upon what kind of questions you ask. Okay? As I said, I'll post the next exam topics and sheet sometime today or tomorrow. If I do it today, it'll be due on a week from today. If I do it tomorrow, it'll be due a week from Thursday. Okay, so you're gonna have at least a week. It'll be the exact same kind of format, probably. I don't see how it would be anything different. Okay, I'm trying to get us, so that once we finish the prophets, we get kind of back on, we stay on track. Because we start the New Testament really, really soon. Like next, I had the syllabus. Next, in 2 weeks, I think it is. Oh, I lost my syllabus. There it is. Matthew on Halloween. And I don't know how. I want to try and fit Mark in somehow. So to do all 4 Gospels. Probably going to drop something. I just don't know what. Okay. Before we start Ecclesiastes, because I said we would talk about this briefly. I don't know if you have with you this little sheet I gave you a week ago. If you do, it's good. If you don't worry about it. I've got, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like I've got 5 extra copies, if anybody needs one. Because I said I wanted to briefly discuss this in relation to the book of Proverbs, because the book of Proverbs has quite a few of these little short, pithy, proverbial statements. Now, the handout is several lines from the first act of Shakespeare's play Hamlet. And in this scene, you have the king's advisor, whose name is Polonius, giving advice to his son Laertes, who's about to go off to school, off to university in Paris. Okay? And as I said, Polonius is the king's advisor. That is, he's in the king's business. Yes? Anybody else? So, because he's the advisor, like a presidential advisor, as I said, he's in the king's business. He hears stuff about the king. He hears stuff for the king. He gives advice to the king, etc., etc. Right? And the reason this passage, I argue at least when I'm teaching Hamlet, is so important is a lot of people suggest that this advice that Polonius gives the son is not good advice. They suggest that it's just Polonius prattling on because he likes to hear his own voice. Okay? I disagree entirely. I think it's all excellent advice. And we'll talk about why. The problem is he doesn't take his own advice, which is the definition of what? He's a hypocrite. Okay? And if you've never read Hamlet, I'll give you away part of the ending. He dies because of it. He's killed because he doesn't take his own advice. Okay? So, Polonius says to Hamlet, "Yet here, Laertes, aboard for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for. There my blessing with thee." So he gives him his blessing, and then he says, "And let me give you these few precepts," that is, these few statements of wisdom, these few proverbs. "See thou character." See thou character does not mean look to your character. Character here means write these down. Okay? In Shakespeare's day, the word character had two meanings. One of them was like a person's character, their personality. The other one was to write. Okay? So when you characterize, what are you doing? You are writing the person's character. You are portraying it. So, keep these in your mind. He's saying, write these in your memory. "Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act." Good advice or bad advice? Give your thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. What's an unproportioned thought? What's it mean to proportion something? Okay, how so? I mean, you're really close. It's form. It's structure. When you figure out the proportion of something, you're figuring out its size. So give no unsized thought his act. How do we state that today? Think before you speak. Think before you act. That is, think it out. Don't act how? Rashly, impulsively. What's been one of President Trump's number one problems? He tweets and then kind of oops. Well, I don't think he goes oops. Other people go oops. All right? "Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar." Familiar. What does it mean when you're familiar with someone? You know them, but you're not what? You're not necessarily really close. So be familiar, be known, but don't be vulgar. Vulgar means always around. You want to be present so that people know where you are, but you don't want to be in their face all the time. "Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried," that is, and you've tested that friendship, "grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel." How many of you have friends that are grappled to your soul with hoops of steel? That is, friends that you know would stick with you through thick and thin. Not fair weather friends. Fair weather friends are like the weather today. Oh, it's sunny, it's beautiful. You're in a good mood. You're happy. You're generous. They're right there. What about when you're not in a good mood, when you're really bitchy, when you're really sad, life just sucks, and you've got a foul temper? Then they go away because they don't want to be around you. He's saying the friends that you have really tested, tie them to you. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched, unfledged comrade. What's a new hatched, unfledged comrade? A brand new acquaintance. It's the number one problem. That's not the number one. It's one of the problems I have with quote unquote social media and the very idea of Facebook friends. Friends that you've never met. I know people who have over 1,000 Facebook friends, but probably 500 of them they've never physically seen or talked. How can you be a friend without having physically met the person? Okay? That's what Polonius is getting at. So, don't dull thy palm with entertainment means don't get into this person, okay, that's new to you, that's new to your circle. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, new idea. Beware of entrance to a quarrel. Don't get in an argument, but being in, if you are in one, do what? Bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. So he's saying, don't get into fights. But if you do get into a fight, let's use the old Pentagon phrase from the second Bush invasion of Iraq. Shock and awe, baby. If you get into an argument, do what? Win. Get into it so much that the other person backs off. That's why that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear. I'd love to see Monty Python do this because they take the ear off and hand it to him. What's that mean? Listen to everyone. But few thy voice. So listen to everyone, but don't what? Not just talk. Don't give advice. Don't give suggestions. Take each man censure. That's part of giving everyone your ear. You hear what they say. What is it to be censured? You're wrong, Daniel. That's what it means. Because we don't like to be told we're wrong, do we? I don't. Maybe you do. In which case, you've got the right class, because I tell people they're wrong all the time on their papers. Okay? Every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man censure, but reserve thy judgment. That is, listen to what everyone says negatively about you, but don't what? The reserve thy judgment part. Don't speak ill of anyone else. Oh, that's hard. Actually, that's biblical. That's in Psalms. That's in the Gospels. Not those exact words, but the ideas. Okay? Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy. That is, wear what you can afford, but not expressed in fancy. That is, don't go. If one of you, were to come in one day, I don't know, if one of you guys were to come in one day wearing a tux, I think the rest of us would go, woo, what's going on? And if you just said, nothing, I just felt like dressing up a little bit, we'd go, that's not dressing up a little bit, right? Rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. What's that mean, the apparel oft proclaims the man? Louder? Just the opposite, in fact. Clothes, he says, often do make the man. For example, coming to class, let's say it's spring. It's towards the end of April. Temperatures are heating up. You come into class wearing shorts and a t-shirt or tank top or something. And you have a job interview that day. Do you wear the same thing to the job interview? Please say no. Because if you do, you're not going to get the job. Okay? Why? Clothes oft make the man. As much as we might rebel against that idea, and believe me, I rebel against it all the time. Okay? I often just wear t-shirts to class. I've got colleagues who wear shorts and such. And that's part of our inherent, English rebellion, so to speak. He goes on and talks about, Frenchies and such. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. Why? Loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. Neither a borrower don't borrow money, nor lend money. Why? And he goes to the second part in the response. Loan often loses both itself and friend. Because what if your friend doesn't pay you back? You're out the money, and it kind of puts the kibosh on the friendship. And borrowing does what? Dulls the edge of husbandry. What's husbandry? Literally, it's the art of animal raising. Metaphorically, it refers to hard work, diligence, industriousness. Well, why get a job and work if you can borrow the money? What eventually happens, however, you got to pay it back. Okay? This above all. So, above all these other precepts in Proverbs, to thine own self be true. And it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. What's it mean? To thine own self be true. Louder. Be true to, how do you be true to yourself? Everyone has, whether they acknowledge it or not. Well, I take that back. Sociopaths don't. Psychopaths don't. Okay? Everyone has a moral compass. Something in them that tells them this is right, this is wrong. A sense of fairness. If you follow that compass, that internal compass, then you will be true to yourself. And that's why he says, if you do that, then you can never be false to anyone else. If you know who you are, what you believe, and you act on that, then that's what will guide you for the rest of your life. Very similar to what the writer of Proverbs says, throughout Proverbs. Right? But let's go to Ecclesiastes. Or the preacher, as it's called. Why? Because the word Ecclesiastes is a Greek translation. Your gloss tells you, or your introduction tells you, page 805 in our edition. 844. Is an attempted Greek translation of the author's pen name, Koholeth. Right? Comes from the same Hebrew root as kahal, assembly, means one who conducts an assembly or a school. Though, I will tell you, Paul Tarazi, who I've mentioned before in here, he actually suggests, where is that? He suggests that the name Kohelet is none other than the Torah, the law, the true Chokmah, wisdom, which is the true king ruler of Israel in what's going to be the New Jerusalem. Okay? Because Kohelet says in 1:16, and then later on in 2:7 and 9, not on that page, so I'll quote it from here, that he surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. And Tarazi suggests that when the speaker, the preacher, says that, he's referring not to, let me rephrase this. He's saying that that's referring to the New Jerusalem, the new Mount Zion. And that, therefore, when he says, I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem, that's talking about the earthly Jerusalem. Okay? We'll talk about that maybe more in a moment. So, it begins, the words of the preacher, and you've got a gloss, Koholeth, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, it's often assumed this is actually whom? Solomon, son of David, known for his wisdom. Though he did have 300 wives and 700 concubines. Not very wise. That's when he lost his wisdom, by the way, or before he lost it. And so what does the speaker begin with? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. 1 verse 2. Jump from there for a moment to almost the very end. And you read, Vanity of vanities, chapter 12, verse 8, says the preacher, all is vanity. So that phrase, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, bookends the entire book. It begins with that, and it ends with that. So we're all going to die, so let's party, right? Well, that's the way some people read it. That because there is no wisdom, because there's no difference between wisdom and folly, because those who are wise, those who are righteous, die just like those who are foolish and those who are sinful. Just, grab what you can out of life and go for it. Well, that's not quite what the preacher or the assembler, if you want, the congregator, if you want, gets at. So let's kind of look at let's see, I want to skip that for a moment. Look at the beginning and kind of quickly go through it. It's kind of divided into two sections. Because my mind is mush. Two sections, chapters 1 through 6, 7 through 12, and look at 1, 2 through 3, or you can summarize these as what does one gain from one's toil? Vanity, vanity, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? So that's the question. Notice the book begins with an assertion. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So, what do you get from your work in life? It doesn't mean work like work in a job. He means life, living, the daily slog of just life, all right? So 1 through 6 kind of give an answer, and 7 through 12 kind of give an answer. 1 through 6 are essentially, these are chapters, a philosophical treatise on life and its absurdities. This, by the way, comes from the Oxford Companion to the Bible, okay? And in 7 through 12 are kind of an ethical discussion of, and I'm going to use a verse from Jeremiah to use this. It's not the same one that the Oxford editors use. How should we then live? That is, what should we do? How should we frame our lives based upon or in response to these kind of discussions? So, let me move that out of the way and put this down here. So what does the speaker, the preacher, say after vanity, vanity, all is vanities? What does one gain from one's toil? What's the very next thing he launches into? What's he talking about? Out there, the natural world. And it does what? It just keeps on rolling. Sun rises, sun sets. Rains come, the water falls, it runs to the sea. And that happens how? Again and again and again. He's talking about the cyclical nature of life and nature. Okay? All things, verse 8, are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Why is the eye not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing? What's he saying there? There's more than what I just see. There's more than just what I hear. He's implying people look around and they explore, they investigate, but what? They're not satisfied. There's something more than just what I see. What has been is what will be. That is what they learn from looking. I mean, we're in the season of what? Fall, right? What's going to happen within a month or so to these trees? The leaves will all be gone. And then a year from now, the leaves will all be back and they'll be ready, getting ready to be gone. And a year later, the same thing. What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done. It's not going to change. It's going to keep happening over and over and over. And there is nothing new under the sun. It's almost like the speaker could stop right there. Because what's he saying? No matter what you do, others have done it. And it doesn't matter. Okay? Is there a thing of which is said, see, this is new. It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to happen among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. And he says, and I applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. So, I tried to find out really what? The nature of things. Or as a 1960s song put it, based upon a film starring Michael Caine, what's it all about, Alfie? That is, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? He tried to apply his wisdom to that question, to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the sons of men to be busy with. What is an unhappy business that God has given to the sons of men to be busy with? That's seeking. Okay, our speaker is writing this according to your introduction, according to this book, the Oxford Companion, according to Tarazi's book, somewhere probably in the 3rd century BC. Okay? About 700 years later, a man named Augustine, who was a bishop in the Western Church, St. Augustine of Hippo, would essentially kind of, before he became a Christian, go about doing the same kind of thing, trying to figure out what's it all about. He tried to figure it out through sex. He thought sex is what it was all about. Okay? He becomes a Christian and he realizes, I was trying to say it's all about sex, and it wasn't. And he says every individual has a hole in their soul. And that hole is a particular shape and a particular size for each person. He calls it a God hole. It's a God-shaped hole. And we all try to fill the hole with various things. The newest, latest one of these, the newest, latest one of these, the newest, latest one of these, sex, drugs, drink, happiness, pleasure, whatever. And he says, no one's hole is filled until it's plugged with God, so to speak. Okay? Well, 2019, 30 years ago, I think that math is right, just about, no, or more than that. About 35 years ago, a very, very famous rock group from Ireland tried to answer the same question with a song that begins, I still haven't found what I'm searching for. Looking for. You too. It's the same notion. He's saying, where does that search come from? God. God puts it in everyone. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, it's all vanity. Now, how do we usually understand the word vanity? If you say someone is vain, what's it mean?
Outward appearance.
Okay. They're narcissistic. He doesn't mean everything is narcissistic, though. It means worthless, useless. How so? Nothing one sees around is going to answer that question. What's it all about? So what does that imply? You got to go beyond what you see and beyond what you hear. You got to go beyond the senses to find the solution to the question. So that's essentially what is going on through these chapters. He's doing what? He's going out and looking for the reason for that question. He's looking for the solution to that question. It's the same kind of thing, similar, at least, that the Greek philosopher Socrates did. I think I've talked before here. Socrates was told by the oracle of Delphi, by the gods, you're the wisest man in the world. He said, get out of here, that can't be right. And so he walks around Athens asking people all kinds of questions to try to find somebody who was wise, somebody who he could acknowledge was wise. And what he found was a bunch of fools. The reason he was considered the wisest man was because he said, I am not wise. I don't know anything. Not know 2 + 2 = 4. No, understand the ultimate reality, the ultimate nature of things. So, the speaker says, 1:16, I said to myself, I've acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. My mind has had great experience in wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom, to know madness and folly. And I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind. How do you strive after the wind? Strive, reach for, work for, run after. How do you run after the wind? It's gone. He says he used what to do this? He applied his mind. It's not going to answer the deep questions. So, chapter 2. I'm going to try out pleasure. Enjoy yourself. This also is vanity. Why? Why is pleasure ultimately vanity? Worthless, useless. It doesn't last. Anybody who's had whether a few sips of any kind of alcohol to a few drinks, to a few cans or glasses or bottles, what? Yeah, you might be numbed for a period, but then what happens? You wake up. The numbing wears off. Okay? It's one of the reasons why junkies stay junkies. They don't become junkies because they want to become junkies. Why do they become junkies? Why does someone become an alcoholic? Why does someone become an abuser of drugs? Because it doesn't make sense. Life doesn't make sense. Or life's got too much pain. So, he says, I search with my mind how to cheer my body with wine. My mind still guiding me with his wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, to might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works, I built houses, I planted gardens, blah, 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 blah. He says, I did all this stuff, and then I realized what? I'm going to die. What's going to happen to everything I built? Somebody else is going to get it, and they're going to squander it away. It's all vanity. You know, at least Bill Gates gave most of his fortune away. Put it in foundations, etc. So his kids can't waste it all. So I turn to consider 2:12, wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? What can the one do who comes afterwards? Only what he has already done. And that kind of means only what people who have come after have done before. He's kind of talking about the cyclical nature of history. George Santayana, early 20th century philosopher, said, those who don't learn the lessons of the past are condemned to repeat them. World War II is a pretty good example of not learning the lesson of World War I. Okay? So, 2:24. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, God, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? Notice what he's saying there. God does what? Provides two things. The eating, the food, and the enjoyment that comes from it. That is, the speaker is saying God intends us to take pleasure from that eating. For to the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and heaping, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity. The this also is vanity is the sinner who gathers and heaps, but somebody else enjoys. Now, is he saying when he says there's nothing better than to eat and drink and be joyful, so party, like the ancient Greeks said? Let us eat, drink, and be merry. Anybody know how the rest goes? For tomorrow we shall die. Kind of what the Spartans thought before they go off into battle. Let's have a kegger tonight because we're dead tomorrow. Well, it's kind of an existential idea. Enjoy life because you don't know when you're going to die. Chapter 3, for everything there is a season. Shoot, and I meant to pull up. Wake up. I don't know if this will be loud enough. I think it will. This is the birds. What year is this? I don't know what year this is. Late 60s. Three, two. Just a little more. Okay, we'll stop there. Notice what, I don't remember which of the writers of the birds modified that. But notice how that's modified towards the end. We hear that a time to love, a time to hate twice. And then what else? Time for peace. What comes next? It's not too late. Why? Yep. It's an anti-war song. Okay, it was, like I said, it was 68, 69. And it was, frequently sung at rallies and such against the war. But look at that passage briefly. At the beginning of chapter 3. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Every matter means every issue, everything under heaven. Time to be born, time to die, right? Everybody that's born dies, okay? Time to plant, time to pluck, time to kill, time to heal, time to break up, time to build up, time to break down, time to build up, time to weep, time to laugh, time to mourn, time to dance, time to cast away stones, time to gather stones together, to embrace, to refrain from embracing, seek, lose, keep, time to cast away, time to rend, time to sow, time to keep. Notice they're all binary opposites. What's the speaker saying? He's essentially encapsulating what we see in the book of Job. Because what comes out of the book of Job? What does Job say at the beginning after his family is wiped out? God did what? The Lord giveth, and he taketh away. Blessed is the name of the Lord. The speaker here is essentially saying that same thing. In other words, life isn't going to be all fun and happiness. You have to take the good with the bad. So, after that little verse, he says, the speaker says, verse 13, it is God's gift to every man that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. What's that mean, to take pleasure in all his toil? He does mean enjoy. How do you take pleasure in your toil? What is your toil? Not mine, yours. What is your toil right now? Like this very moment. Listening and participating, right? If I ask a question, answering, etc. He's saying, because that's your work as students. I know you have work outside the university. You've got jobs, etc. It's also taking pleasure in that. How? What if you have a crappy job? How can you do that job? You can either do it crappily because it's a crappy job, And you might say, nobody cares. Or the speaker says, you can find some pleasure in it. Notice he doesn't add on what the church will essentially add on. Do it to the glory. Doesn't say that at all. He just says find pleasure in what? In everything you do. Make something about it pleasurable. Okay? Go to the end of chapter 3, and we're going to hear the same thing. He's going to repeat it. Why? Because he's going to repeat this idea throughout these 6 chapters, and actually, he's going to repeat it also until the end of the book. 22, verse 22. So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should enjoy his work, for that is his lot. What is his lot? The enjoyment part could be. I think that his lot refers to work. Work. Why is it his lot? Lot there is like, that's the hand he's been dealt. Why? Go back to Genesis. What happened as a result of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? The curse, right? And what did the curse entail? God said, Adam, and I think in saying it to Adam, it's implied Adam and Eve. I know Eve has, she will give birth in pain, and Adam must what? Till the fruit, till the ground, but it's going to produce thorns and stuff. In other words, he has to work. But guess what? He worked in the garden before that. Only then, it didn't bring forth weeds. It's like, he tilled the garden, ooh, everything came up wonderfully. All the seeds sprouted. He didn't lose any of it. Okay? Now, you've got to work. Okay? Go on. Look at 5. Nothing in 4. Look at 5:18. Behold, what I have seen to be good and to be fitting. Fitting means appropriate, right. What I've seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink. So, eating and drinking, because if you don't, you die. Is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life which God has given him. For this is his lot. It's the few days of his life under the sun. That's his lot. Notice, few implies we don't live long. We're not here long. We are, and we're gone. Okay? So, eat and drink and enjoy what you can. Every man also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them. So, if God has given you these things, wealth, power, and possessions, enjoy them. Accept his lot, to accept your position, and find enjoyment in his toil. This is the gift of God. Why? For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. Okay? That's 5. 6. There is an evil which I've seen under the sun, and it lies heavy upon men. So here's this evil, and it applies to all men. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing at all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. Well, why doesn't he give him power to enjoy them? Or why does the person not enjoy them? So God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, and yet a stranger enjoys them. How so? It's almost like once the person has all 3, he dies. And somebody else inherits it. There's a passage in the Old English poem Beowulf where Hrothgar, the old Danish king, gives a homily, essentially, a sermon to Beowulf. He's a pagan. He doesn't believe in Jesus. Okay? He's never heard of Jesus. And he essentially says, the Creator allows certain people to get wealth, power, possessions, prestige. And when that happens, the person who gets that then thinks I have earned all this on my own. And the conscience falls asleep. And what happens? The person loses it all. How? Something comes. What's the something? Old age, death by sword, death by fire, death by a flood, death by famine. Okay? Because he forgets he wasn't always like this. He wasn't always wealthy and powerful, etc., etc. Okay? So he says, if a man begets 100 children, lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but he does not enjoy life's good things, also has no bear, I say that an untimely birth is better off than he. If you don't enjoy what you have, and that's part of the enjoying the toil, then it's all going to essentially be meaningless. Let's go on a little bit. Chapter 8. Who is like the wise man? Who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his countenance is changed. Keep the king's command. Now, what's the king's command? The law. King there might be metaphorical for the king. And because of your sacred oath, do not be dismayed. Go from his presence, do not delay, etc., etc. Word of the king is supreme. Right? Chapter 9. Chapter 8, 16. When I applied my mind to know wisdom, and to see the business that is done on earth on neither day nor night, one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. However much one looks into the nature, you're not going to discover it. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. But all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God, whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Everything before them is vanity. Why? Because one fate comes to all. What's the one fate? We all die. Hamlet again. In the play Hamlet, Hamlet kind of goes on about, guess what? King dies, poor man dies. We all end up food for worms. Okay? Go to the very end. We've got a couple minutes left. Chapter 12. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw nigh, when you will say, I have no pleasure in them. That is, he's saying, when you get ready to die, you're going to say, my life sucked. So remember your Creator. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened, the clouds return. So, 12:7. And the dust returns to the earth as it was, that is, when your body dissipates, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. 9 and following. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging proverbs with great care. He sought to find pleasing words, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The sayings of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings which are given by one shepherd. Some take that to refer to Proverbs, the book. My son, beware of anything beyond these. I'm making many books, there is no end. Okay? So here's the whole point, the speaker says at the end. Now, your introduction, Oxford Companion, they say this is tacked on by somebody else. Here's the end of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. That's it. That's not vanity. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of men. Duty? That implies toil. This is the toil of man. This is the work of humanity. Fear God, do his commandments. Okay? Now, Tarazi says, that's what this stuff is. This is the whole point of the entire book. Why? Because outside those two things, whatever one does, doesn't matter. You can be the greatest at whatever you do. Without those two things, it doesn't matter at all. Okay, we'll stop there. As I said, I'll put out an exam today or tomorrow for Thursday, Jonah and Habakkuk, I think is what I said.